A demonstration is being staged in the capital today to highlight the plight of homeowners whose houses have been structurally damaged because of pyrite, which was used in their construction. The mineral can expand over time, leading to problems which can cost thousands of euro to put right. Around 50,000 homes, it's estimated, in Dublin, Meath, Kildare and Offaly are thought to be affected. But what is pyrite exactly, and how does it affect your home? Paul Quigley is a director at IGSL based in Naas. Paul, thanks for taking our call this morning.
Hi, Will, good morning.
Now, it's fool's gold, isn't that the colloquial term for pyrite?
It is, yeah, that's the term that's used from a geological perspective. But the pyrite itself is referred to, or the actual technical name is iron sulfide. And
is it a deliberate component in construction, or does it happen to get in there?
It does. Well, it's part of an awful lot of our limestones and mudstones. Pyrite would be an integral part of the actual fabric of the rock.
Okay, so to some extent it's unavoidable.
Well, it is, but I suppose a lot of this comes down to the classification of materials and obviously testing them in advance to find out what we call the engineering geological properties of the material is.
So for non-engineers, could you explain why a high concentration of pyrite would be a problem?
I suppose the problem we have with pyrite is that it's been recognised worldwide as being an issue in the likes of Canada, Australia, northeast England. It's associated with what we call calcareous shales and mudstones. And when the material is quarried, the pyrite becomes oxidised, and effectively an alteration occurs. So what happens is the pyrite oxidises with air and moisture. And if it's used in underfloor fill applications, we get what's called an adverse reaction. So in simple terms, the pyrite degrades over time, particularly after being oxidised and placed as a structural fill.
And the effect then in a home, a practical example would be?
Well, over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done extensive testing and sampling in places like North Dublin, Kildare, Offaly, as you said. And what we're seeing is significant structural damage occurring because you're getting the oxidation process kicks in. The pyrite reacts with the host rock and forms what's called calcium sulfate, which is gypsum. And gypsum is what causes the expansion or the volumetric increase in the underfloor fill material. So in simple terms, you've got if you have moisture in the underfloor fill material, the oxidation process kicks in. Heat plays a big factor as well. And what we typically see is within 3 to 4 years of occupancy in a property, we see the expansion process effectively being triggered and manifested itself then. And we're seeing significant structural damage, which is attributable to pyrite degradation. And
that type of structural damage, would it include crumbling or a more brittle stone?
Well, typically what we see is, in terms of floor slabs, would be uplift and foundations, because again, from an expansion point of view, we see structural damage on floors, partitions. In many properties that we've examined over the last couple of years, what we've seen is it's almost like internally there's been almost like a mini earthquake that's hit the property. Very severe structural damage internally, but externally no damage whatsoever. So if you go back to in terms of geological properties, the principal rock type that we're sort of looking for, if you like, is what's called these calcareous shales and mudstones. So the grey, black, earthy mudstones, if they contain reactive pyrite, or what we call framboidal pyrite in the industry, that's what typically causes the adverse reaction to occur and produces the calcium sulfate or gypsum. So it's that kind of combination or sort of recipe, if you like.
And how do you remedy the problem? What sort of structural work needs to be done?
A lot of the projects that we've been involved in, the only solution, people have talked about sort of alternatives, but the only real solution to deal with this is to effectively excavate out the floor slab, remove all the underfloor fill material, replace it with clean imported or proof fill, compact that in place, re-pour the slab, and then you've obviously got all the associated work in terms of painting, decorating, plumbing, wiring to be done. So effectively, the property becomes a shell for possibly 8 to 10 weeks, and you're looking at a significant structural remediation program to be carried out.
Okay, so you have the cost of living somewhere else, you have the cost of redecorating, you have the cost of the work itself. What sort of a bill could you be looking at for, say, a standard 3-bedroom house?
Well, I know we've dealt with a number of homeowners in the last couple of years who've sort of indicated values of our cost of the order between 60 and 80,000 currently, and possibly greater. Then that would be for sort of a typical 3-bed semi or a 4-bed semi property, so maybe 1,500 square foot or something of that order.
And is this a preventable problem? Are there, for example, standards in place that would require a minimum level of pyrite to be
Absolutely.
in?
Well, I mean, in some respects, I mean, Ireland has been a little bit unusual in the way we've addressed this whole pyrite problem in the last 4 years. I mean, there's been a number of high-profile court cases, the most recent one between James Elliott Construction and Lagan in the High Court. And, you know, we've been involved with significant sampling, testing and analysis as part of those court cases, or been involved in a number of cases where we've done exhaustive testing. And what people don't realise is that since 2002, I think it is, we've had standards in place here called ISEN 13242, which is the national standards documentation, which sets out limits for what's called sulphur content, total sulphur, and what's called the total sulphate in the material. And again, if the material that's being used as underfloor fill or in structural applications whatsoever is tested, and we establish the total sulphur content, the sulphate content of the material, and we understand what we call the geological or the engineering geological aspects of the material or characteristics, we can very easily characterise the potential for that. I suppose what I've found, and I've been speaking about this to people in Engineers Ireland, is that, you know, the industry really hasn't, I suppose, with the amount of building work that went on and construction work over the last 8 or 10 years, there was very little emphasis on testing and you know, proper evaluation of the material properties, if you like.
Right, and why would some elements of the industry choose to ignore those standards? Is a high concentration of sulphur in stone, in material, is that material more or less expensive than something that is compliant?
Well, that's an interesting question. In terms of, I suppose, if you look at quarries and the way they approach their testing regimes, I mean, they'll test the material at maybe a feasibility stage. But I think historically they may not have understood as well the implications that pyrite might have. Even though, as I said, it's been well documented in Canada, North East England, South Wales and parts of Europe and Australia, where, you know, it's a fairly well-known phenomenon that calcareous hills and mudstones with pyrite in them, or framboidal pyrite, is effectively a recipe for, you know, significant structural damage due to swelling and expansion, whether they didn't appreciate it at an early stage during the processing of material. But again, I think if they had followed those kind of standards that are out there and had got a thorough geotechnical or what we call an engineering geological evaluation, then it would have been very clear that the material wouldn't have been suitable in terms of underfloor or structural fill applications such as underfloor slabs.
But would there be a financial incentive to look the other way?
Well, I mean, it's like everything. I mean, if you're a quarry manager or a quarry operation, you know, the amount of tests that you do is very much governed or dictated by the specification for what you're supplying to the industry. And again, you know, the question is, were consulting engineers and architects reviewing information? Was testing being carried out on a regular basis? So there's a whole series of questions, I think, for the industry as a whole in this respect. And, you know, the sort of guidelines, I think, unfortunately, as well, there's no guidelines in the industry in Ireland. I mean, if you look at our Engineers Ireland, as I say, the main governing body, and I'm involved with the geotechnical group within that, we don't have any documentation currently that sets out the protocols, if you like, for the sampling, testing and evaluation of something of this nature, if you like. I mean, that's something I would hope that we can address over the next year or so, that we can put together. I've been pushing this at committee level, that we will put a document together that will give, if you like, architects, consulting engineers, structural engineers, if you like, a kind of a guide, if you like, in terms of assessing suitability of materials for reuse as underfloor fill.
Okay, well, that's a preventative measure for the future.
I hope so. Yeah.
Coming back to the demonstration today, homeowners say that Home Bond guaranteed them against such damage. I suppose it'll only be through legal avenues as to whether that is proven or not.
Yeah.
In the court cases that have been taken that you're aware of, what tends to be the outcome?
Well, I suppose the Manoli Lagan case was reported in the media last year. There was no real details supplied on that one. It's a little bit, I suppose, from the industry point of view, we don't know the full details in terms of the outcome on the technical side of it. There was an agreement put in place, we understand, between Manoli and Lagans to remediate the properties in Drynham and other projects in North Dublin. The most recent case we've been involved in with James Elliott, the court has ruled in favour of James Elliott Construction. There's, I think, a window now for an appeal on that one, where I'm not sure how that one is going to pan out. I mean, we've been involved, as I said, at a technical level there. Judge Charlton made a decision 2 weeks ago, and whether that's rebutted or whatever, we're not sure where that will go. But we feel that was probably a very important case for the whole pyrite issue, because it's been argued and debated. Interesting enough, I think we're the only country worldwide that I know where this whole pyrite issue has gone to the courts, as I said, in Pennsylvania, in the States, in Canada, in northeast England, South Wales. It's been accepted. It's been known for centuries, or for certainly over 100 years at least, that pyrite is a real potential problem in terms of suitability of fill materials in structural applications. Unfortunately, in Ireland, we've had probably 4.5 to 5 years of protracted debates and legal discussions, or sort of legal arguments, if you like, on what is attributable to structural damage and where all this has come from.
Just finally, Paul, on the extent of the problem, one figure being quoted is that 50,000 homes in Offaly, Dublin, Meath and Kildare could be affected. Would you think that's close to the mark, or is it crystal ball territory?
Well, if you look at the number, if you look at what quarries were producing well over the, say the period 2000, 2001 up to maybe 2007 or 8, that sort of 6 or 7 year window, I think about the amount of fill that's been used in terms of a 3-bed or 4-bed semi-house or apartments complexes. Some of the quarries would have been producing several 100,000 tonnes of aggregate per year. So if you think about the quantities over that 6 or 7 year period, then potentially I think that figure could be correct. What we've noticed over the last 2 years in particular is that it seems to be the period of around 2003 to 2006. Because typically what we're seeing is that it takes normally, the trend that we've noticed is that it's usually 3 to 4 years post-occupancy is when we start to see the structural damage develop and manifest itself. Because what you're back to then is the combination of the fill being confined under the floor slab, you've got heat over a period of a couple of years, you've got moisture in the material, so you've got the conditions, if you like, the optimal conditions for the reaction then to kick in or start to manifest itself.
But if the damage does manifest, and if that figure of 50,000 is accurate and the repair bill comes to tens of thousands of euro, this is going to be a very expensive issue.
Yes, and I've talked, again, it's an issue I've brought up at the committee level in the geotechnical group. I think this is a huge issue, and whether one of the government agencies or bodies like the Geological Survey or somebody, I think, is going to look at this, because I think ultimately, we could have, potentially that sort of number to deal with.
Paul Quigley, Director at IGSL, based in Naas in County Kildare, thank you very much for your time this morning.